We begin with an epic clash over the history course that put Florida in the national spotlight this week. The blowback was fast and furious, even before details of the new AP Advanced Placement African American History course and the reason it was rejected became public. State administrators see violations of new law in the curriculum. Black leaders give voice to fears of a whitewashing of history and culture. That AP course is currently taught in a few dozen schools as a pilot rollout, but this week, College Board, the organization that creates AP curriculum, agreed to revisit the content and bring it back to the Florida education administrators to reconsider. State Senator Shevrin Jones, Democrat repping parts of North and Northeast Miami-Dade now, tip of the spear for a gathering in Tallahassee this week that included threats of lawsuits against the state for the exclusion. Senator Jones, welcome. Good morning.
Thank you so much for having me, Glenna.
So I want to get your sort of hindsight perspective. This all became part of Florida's current culture wars, really, even before anyone saw the actual syllabus. So have things changed now that details of what this course includes has come out?
Well, Glenna, I don't think things have changed from the perspective of the governor and the Department of Education, because I think they were extremely clear in the beginning in what they said, and that the African American studies brought no educational value to students. But by mind you, 60 schools from across this country, 2 happen to be here within the state of Florida, have already piloted these programs. Teachers, professors, experts within the field of African American studies, they have presented everything to the department to show that it was quality information that students need, and that students who opt in to take this class should learn if they decide to take an African American studies class.
Yeah, so I want to talk about this. I mean, this has been sort of in the middle of the political firestorm this week, and I want to try to come out of that politics perspective and take a look at this kind of factually, because I mean, there's no doubt the perception and fear is just like at crisis levels at the moment. But you just referenced, the governor first said there's no educational value, and I think that was sort of the trip of the hand grenade. But then looking back, the real story of why this was rejected was because of very specific and certain pieces of the curriculum that involve Black queer study and writers who have been communist or Marxist without the other side included in the curriculum. And there are very specific things in there. And that actually does violate current state law. Love or hate the law, it is the law. And those things really do not comport with that. Is that a valid observation?
I think it's a valid observation, but I also think it's important to point out in 1994, when the African American Studies was deemed the law of the land here in Florida, and then fast forward to 2018 with Stop the Woke Act, now you're refereeing how that same African American Studies should be taught. And I also want to make it clear that these themes in which the governor is talking about, queer theory, Black Lives Matter movement, the abolishing of jails, all of these things that the governor put out came after the fact, because on the forefront of it is that the governor and the Department of Education, they said what they said, and that was the education, that it brought no educational value. It wasn't until after the fact that they said that, oh, queer theory is in here, which violates the law. Black Lives Matter movement violates the law. And because they're trying to justify everything that they know is wrong, that shouldn't have come out in the first place.
That's why, I mean, to your point, that's why I'm saying this has become such a political hot topic that it's sort of like the facts of it get lost in the soup. So what I want to ask you is, the Florida Department of Education actually does mandate Black history studies. And I pulled the curriculum that is currently being taught. There is Black history, civil rights, Black power movement. There is the enslaved experience, assessment of Jim Crow laws. Let me quote it right out. Assess how Jim Crow laws influence life for African Americans. Writings by Malcolm X and Black Panthers. So I guess my question is, what currently is not being taught to Florida students that this course would make good on?
Well, Glenn, I think it's important to point out that during a survey, it was shown that truly only 12 counties in the state of Florida are actually teaching Black history.
Well,
And
would that then be a violation of the state mandate, though?
absolutely would be a violation of the state mandate. But as we know, the state is not trying to figure out what counties are teaching Black history and what counties are not teaching Black history. And i.e., that's why we're here in square one.
Hmm. So let me go back to that question. Is there, aside from these 12 counties, I don't know what those 12 counties are, maybe you do. I know in South Florida, Dade, Broward, Monroe, those things are in the curriculum. Do you think, let me pose the question this way, do you think Florida students, South Florida students, are ill-served or not being served by current curriculum?
I think that students, whether you're talking about African American studies, whether you're talking about Jewish history, Asian history, when you're not teaching students the facts, when you're not teaching them their history, I mean, as the old saying, they are bound to repeat it. And I believe that it's important that the entire story is told to our children, and especially when it comes to our curriculum. Remember, these curriculums are done by experts. Teachers come in to put together these curriculums, and so taking any part of a curriculum that has been vetted, that has been sought through by experts, and saying and politicians then deciding what should and should not be taught. Yeah, I think it's insensitive to the people who put the time and effort in to create these curriculums in the first place.
And some of them, at least one of them, a gentleman who works at Felix Varela High School, which we had hoped to get on the show, was part of, at least on the list of part of writing this curriculum. So I just want to sort of get personal with you for a moment because you have opened the door to that publicly over the last session, when there were a lot of things that affected a lot of people very personally were being bandied about, be it the gay rights, parental rights in school, and all the educational curriculum. You stood up, you publicly gave some very personal accounts of yourself as a Black gay legislator. And then your colleagues voted to enshrine some laws and statutes right now, part of which we've been talking about for the last 7 minutes. What is your take on what's to come in this upcoming session?
Well, I think the governor has already given the tone and the tenor of what the next legislative session is going to look like. Last year was the attack on LGBTQ men and women, and while that was being done in one hand, the governor was giving tax breaks to big corporations. This year, it looks like it's going to be an attack on Black people, while they are also planning to continue to strip women's rights to choose and put further restrictions on cities and counties to be able to provide rent control for Floridians. So while they're dangling this carrot of culture wars, on the other hand, they're taking rights away from Floridians. And truth be told, I think everyone across this nation should be watching what's happening in Florida, because if it can happen in Florida, it can happen in Texas, it can happen in Tennessee, it can happen in Colorado. And so I think that what the governor and the Republicans are doing currently right now in the state of Florida, people should be paying close attention to. This legislative session will set the tone for the country. I can guarantee you that.
Well, we actually are watching. Can you give us a couple of minutes? We are going to hit a commercial break and we'll be right back. And I really want to talk more about this curriculum. Stay tuned. We are back talking with Florida State Senator Shevrin Jones about the AP African Americans History course that was rejected by the state and the blowback that ensued this week. Senator, I wanted to ask you, you had tweeted something about how some AP courses that were not rejected include Japanese history, German, other European countries' history, Italian history. Have you seen these, what's the plural of syllabus? Syllabi? Have you seen the syllabi of those courses?
I have not seen the syllabus of those courses, but I do know that the syllabi of the course for the African American Studies, they use those other courses as a framework to create the African American Studies framework, talking about it from the very time of the existence up until present day. And so, yeah, they follow. There was a precedent for the framework in which the African American Studies had been followed.
And so now that College Board, which really has not been very vocal and public this week about what's to come, but did say that they would revisit this curriculum of this particular course, bring it back to Florida education administrators for reconsideration. Do you consider that, well, I don't want to put words in your mouth. How do you consider that?
I appreciate that. So the College Board actually wrote a letter to its members, and they made it clear that on February 1st, which is the first day of Black History Month, that they were going to release the official framework for the AP African American Studies course. And they made it clear that they have worked and planned for this day for many months, and they're going to work to make sure they get the trust of the state of Florida and people from across the country. The College Board is not new. They're not new to this either. And so that's why this whole idea and this whole concept that the state of Florida is moving in, talking about wokeism, talking about indoctrination, telling kids what they students what they can and cannot learn in an opt-in course, it's dangerous on the surface. And I think the College Board even knows that. I don't believe the College Board is going to change their curriculum because of the state of Florida. I just really truly doubt it.
So then what are they changing, as they say they are, for reconsideration?
Well, based on the letter that came from the College Board, they just said that they're going to put out the framework because of the amount of time that the experts who were doing this curriculum that they put into this. This was almost a year worth of piloting that had taken place across the country with students and teachers and professors and experts. You can't have one person come who say, oh, well, I don't like this, and say that it can't be taught. That's not how this works. You're not a dictator. The authoritarian regime type of thing that you're trying to do in Florida, it just doesn't work across the country.
So the woke indoctrination, that has become, that's almost like this political season's socialism, which was last political season. And those things have meanings, but they've sort of entered the political lexicon as criticism and rhetoric and kind of a baiting of sorts of people who, we are a divided state, no doubt. So woke, I think, started out as kind of a compliment, people who are aware, newly aware of things. Indoctrination sort of is an interesting word because when you look at some of it, like when the governor looks or talks about Black queer theory, here's a man who has 3 little kids. And he speaks for a lot of people who see that and are afraid of what they don't know. So how do you get past that?
Well, I mean, the hard part about all of this is you're right. The governor and the Republicans across this country, they're using terms like woke. They're using terms like indoctrination. Woke, to be particular, was a word that was used back in the 1930s and brought back up again in 2014 with the uprising of police violence. It was used to tell African Americans to stay vigilant about policies that were coming across from elected officials in different states. And now it's being turned, and many are making it a term that is really rallying up a base, where in actuality, African Americans or Black people, we still look at staying woke as what it is, and us being vigilant about what's happening across the country. And I think it's dangerous what we're seeing, because it is truly taking us back into a time that we, and I say we because Black, white, Jews, gay, straight, all fought extremely hard to get us out of a time during the civil rights movement to the place we are in right now. But unfortunately, we are regressing, and Black people, LGBTQ people are being the political punching bags for the governor to use on his rise to national power.
I think the onus now falls a lot to Florida parents to teach their kids, which is actually a lot of what some of those laws have as a goal.
Well, I don't disagree that parents should have a very have their hands in their child's education, but the parents send their children to school for a reason, to be able to explore what they're taught at home. And you're right, there is a sense or opportunity for communities to start teaching African American studies within our own communities, but that does not give an outs to the state to reject AP African American studies for students to be able to explore along in the realm of academia.
I think this week we are able to see the rollout of whatever College Board comes out next. So we'll be watching that. State Senator Shevrin Jones, always great to have you on the program.
Thank you so much for having me, Glenn.